Hello, so my name is Mike Harris and I will be talking to you today with an overview of welfare benefits and services for disabled people. I work for an organisation called WECIL, which is the West of England Centre for Inclusive Living. It's a disabled people's organisation and we provide services and help disabled people, their carers and families. The area that I work in is disability benefits, and I've been doing that for about 3 years now. So as an organisation, we tend to cover the Old Avon area, and my talk today focuses on Bristol, South Gloucestershire and North Somerset. So when you are a disabled person, one of the key issues could be earnings replacement benefits. It might be that you've got a limited capacity to work, or that you're not fit for work at all. So if you are still working and you're working at least 16 hours a week, you can claim working tax credits. So these are a top up to try and bring your income level up to something upon which you can live. As well as working tax credits, there is an additional top up, a working tax credit disability element that you can be entitled to, would be entitled to, if you successfully applied for a disability benefit. So that could be personal independence payment or disability living allowance. If, however, you're stopping work or have stopped work because you're not fit for work, then you would need to apply for employment in support allowance to replace income. So this is a benefit that you apply for if you don't think that you are fit for work. It might be that you don't think you're ever going to be fit for work, or it might be that you don't think you're currently going to be fit for work, but could be in the future. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it is possible that you could apply for employment in support allowance but not be eligible to be paid any money. That can happen. Employment in support allowance can be contribution based, but it can also be means tested. So if you apply for it and you don't get any money, but you are eligible for the benefit, it's still worth being assessed and being given approval for the benefit, because although you won't get any direct income out of it, it would help maintain your national insurance contributions, which obviously gives you rights to things like state pension in the future. So it's still worthwhile doing. If somebody is caring for you, they can be entitled to carers allowance, and they can claim carers allowance. Carers allowance is payable as long as that you are being looked after for 35 hours a week. That's one of the main criteria. If a person claiming carers allowance, however, earns more than £104 a week, they won't be able to be paid any money. Again, carers allowance helps maintain national insurance contributions. So those are some income replacement benefits. I haven't mentioned it on the slide, but of course there is also job seekers allowance, which anybody can claim whether they're disabled or not if they are unemployed and seeking work. So moving on now to disability benefits. Disability benefits are payable if you meet the criteria. They are there really to provide for the extra costs that people can incur if they are a disabled person. They are not means tested, so your income, your partner's income, your capital or savings are not taken into account and don't matter, and they're not currently taxable. So disability living allowance is an outstanding one for adults. In fact, the situation is about to change, but currently, if you're living in this area and you have a Disability Living Allowance award and you want to try and get some more, you can apply for what they call a supersession to try and increase it. However, if at the moment you don't have Disability Living Allowance and you want to apply for a disability benefit and you're of working age, which is 16 to 64, then you would need to apply for personal independence payment. So personal independence payment is the newer disability benefit. It's part of the government's welfare reform. So if you're aged 16 to 64, doesn't matter whether you're working or not, you can apply for personal independence payment. If you're age 65 and over and don't already have a disability benefit, so you're age 65 or over, you don't have Disability Living Allowance, you don't have personal independence payment, then you can apply for attendance allowance. Other benefits. Well, you can get council tax relief. It used to be called council tax benefit, and each council now runs their own scheme, and I think there's a variation in the various names, but the sort of global title will be local council tax relief. So that's help with the cost of paying your council tax. Now, in addition to that, if you are a disabled person and you meet the criteria, there is a council tax disability reduction scheme. So what this does, if you meet the criteria, allows for a reduction in your council tax banding. So if you're in D, you would drop down to C. If you were in C, you would drop down to B. And if you were B, you would drop down to A. Now, if you're in A, you can still benefit from this by getting a 16% discount. The rules, there are 3 rules, which are broadly, if your home is big enough and has appropriate doorways to take a wheelchair, or if you've got a separate room used solely by the disabled person, or a separate bathroom and kitchen for the disabled person, then you could qualify for this. And you can get it in addition to local council tax relief. Then there is, of course, housing benefit for help with your rent. And if you're a mortgage holder, you can get help with mortgage interest. That's a very brief run through of welfare benefits. Moving on now to local authority assessments. So these are provided for people who want to live in their own homes but need some help and support with their personal care and also to socialise. To start with this, you would need to contact your local authority, adult social care. So in Bristol, for example, that is known as Care Direct. They will ask you some questions around what sort of help you need, just to get a broad view as to whether it's appropriate for you to be assessed. And then you would be contacted by a social worker or a social work practitioner from adult social care, who would meet with you and go through a form called self-directed support. It's quite a long and detailed form, and it asks you a lot of information about the difficulties that you're having with your personal care at home and socialising. And the idea behind this is to see if you meet the criteria for the support, and then to see what sort of care can be provided for you. What would happen there is the social worker or social work practitioner would produce a report, and it might say, for example, okay, so you can't prepare and cook a meal for yourself, so we think that you need somebody to come in twice a day for an hour every day of the week to do that. So we think that you need 14 hours help. So they would then do a financial assessment, looking at all of your income and expenditure, including your disability-related expenditure, and make an assessment as to whether or not you're eligible for this financial help, or if you're able to make a financial contribution. And then they would talk to you about perhaps commissioning a local care agency to come in and provide you with the care, or the alternative would be what they call direct payments, where you would become an employer and employ a carer, or otherwise known as a personal assistant, to come and see you every day and provide you with the help that you need. As well as personal care, you can get an assessment from your local authority if you need equipment or adaptations to your home. So it might be that you need an extra step or a ramp outside of your house. You might need some bars on the wall to help you go up and down steps or to get into your house. You might need alterations to your bathroom, to your toilet. You might need alterations in the kitchen, or you might need a perching stool for you to be able to support yourself at the sink. So you can get an assessment from your local authority done by an occupational therapist to see what equipment or adaptations would help you. And they would also talk to you about funding for that, as to whether or not the council would be able to provide it, or whether you would have to pay for this yourself. You can get grants for disabled facilities, local authority disabled facilities grants, and you would need to contact your local council or your local authority to see if you're eligible for a grant. This can be for things like a downstairs wet room. Let's say that you're unfortunately now in a wheelchair and can't get upstairs to your bathroom, so you could have an extension on the back of your home to provide you, say, with a wet room and toilet facilities. And grants can be provided for that. So as well as those grants from your local authority, there are a number of charitable grants available. There are numerous organisations in the UK that provide charitable grants. The information is available on a really useful website which is called Turn to Us. If you go on there, you can put in some brief information about your location, what type of disability you might have. It doesn't ask an awful lot of questions, and you wouldn't have to give them any personal information, but it would then produce a whole list of organisations that you could contact to see if you're eligible for a grant. A good one locally, for example, in Bristol is stmonicatrust.org. Community fund. So a lot of this information is available on the internet, readily available if you Google it. I fully appreciate that some people have access issues with the internet and just may not be able to access it. If that is the case, then the contact details from my organisation come up later along on one of the slides, and you can feel free to contact us, and we'll try and provide the information for you. I'm also aware that whilst a number of libraries might be closing, library staff can be very, very helpful if you go along when it comes to internet access. So that's another thing that you might like to consider. Talking more about the St Monica Trust Community Fund, just to give you an idea of the sort of criteria that you would have to meet to get grants. They do vary, but St Monica's is quite a good example. So for St Monica's, you would need to have a physical disability or a long-term physical health problem. You would need to live in Bristol, South Gloucestershire, North Somerset, or Bath and North East Somerset, so that's the old Avon region. You need to have a low income and limited savings. Cash is generally, as we know, very tight all around nowadays, and so that's a key feature of a number of grants. And indeed, if you are applying for a charitable grant, they do normally expect you to have looked at what other help might be available, such as claiming a disability benefit, and they will probably ask you that question when you're making an application. So for example, if you had mobility issues and perhaps needed a help with a mobility car or scooter, or cost of taxis and that kind of thing, the starting point for that would be to apply for a disability benefit, so disability living allowance for children, personal independence payment for adults, and most charitable organisations would expect you to make an application for that first of all. The other criteria there is if you're over 40 years of age. There are other organisations out there that can provide grants and help if you're younger. This is just the criteria for St Monica's. So there is another local organisation called We Care and Repair. Now I am aware that very, very recently funding for We Care and Repair in South Gloucestershire has sadly been ended by South Gloucestershire Council, but this is a really good organisation, so if you need repairs and help around your home, you can contact them. They can sort out tradesmen for you usually, and they can provide you with information about grants that might be available to help you with the costs. If you have issues around heating, there's a very good organisation in Bristol called the Centre for Sustainable Energy. The contact details are there, and if you contact them, they can help you with things like suitable meters that provide you with more cost-effective heating. Contact them. They also have information about grants that might be available for things like lagging in your loft and that kind of thing, and maybe if you've got an old inefficient boiler, maybe about getting that replaced as well. So they've got a wide range of services and projects, so contact them. Mobility can be a problem for many of us. There are several things which you have available to you. So there is the Motability scheme. So if you are someone who has applied for and successfully got a mobility benefit, so that could be the mobility component of PIP, Personal Independence Payment, or it could be the mobility component of DIP, DLA, Disability Living Allowance, then you can apply for a car or a scooter through the Motability scheme. Blue badges are available through your local authority. You don't need to be getting a mobility benefit to successfully apply for a blue badge, but it can help if you have successfully applied for a mobility benefit. Blue badges applications, normally they do require quite a lot of detailed information about your mobility restrictions and often medical evidence from GP or maybe specialists. Community transport schemes, there are a number of them. One of the most well-known in Bristol is Bristol Dial-A-Ride Service, which I believe is changing its name to Social Access. So these are organisations that you can join, pay a fee, and then you can get transport, usually a minibus, picking you up at home at normally a sort of discounted charge, but it's usually more convenient and easier to access, say, than a bus, or perhaps more cheaper than using a taxi. That's really the end of the information on the slides. What I've done now is provided a few more slides with contact details which you might find useful. So the first one is me. My name is Mike Harris, and that's my email at WECIL. So my project is the Disabled People's Helpline. It's a helpline open from Monday to Friday between 9 AM and 5 PM. It is funded by Bristol City Council, so it's there primarily to help and support residents of Bristol. If you're outside of Bristol and you are someone with MS, then we also provide the service for the Bristol and South Gloucestershire and North Somerset MS societies. If you are someone who falls outside those criteria, we will do our best to help you if you ring the helpline. Quite often it might mean giving you information and contact details about some help and support in your local area. More information. So these are contact details for some of the organisations that I've mentioned in my previous slides. So tax credits are dealt with by HMRC Tax Credit Office, and that's the email address and the helpline number. The Department of Work and Pensions, they administer disability benefits, and there's contact details there for them. Employment and Support Allowance, the starting point for an Employment and Support Allowance claim is ringing the helpline, and there's the helpline number. Normally, to make an Employment and Support Allowance application, you start off by making the phone call and then going through a lot of information on the telephone. If you want, they will send you a form which you can complete instead, but their preference is for you to give information by telephone. Carers allowance, if you want to apply for carers allowance, there's a helpline number, and I understand now that very recently there is the ability to do an online application. So disability living allowance, again, there's a helpline for that. Attendance allowance, also another helpline, and PIP, personal independence payment, a helpline for that. Normally for these benefits, you need to ring up to get a form. That's certainly the case with PIP, personal independence payment. If you want to make an application, you must ring up and get a form. You can't download a form. Anything available on the internet is just for information only. With attendance allowance and disability living allowance, if you want to, you can download a PDF form, get it completed and sent back. I would recommend that if you make an application for any disability benefit, you get help from an independent advice agency to do this. So if you're a resident of Bristol, you're a Bristol Council taxpayer, if you contact WECIL, we can help and support you with office appointments to complete disability benefit forms. If you live outside of the Bristol area, you can contact your local independent advice agency, you can contact the Citizens Advice Bureau, you can contact Age UK. There are a number of organisations you can contact for help and support, but I do recommend that you get help and support completing these forms. Local authorities, so I have mentioned some grants and other things available through your local authorities, and those are the contact details for them. That's Bristol, South Gloucestershire and North Somerset. I haven't included Bath and North East Somerset, but I'm sure that that's readily available if you go on Google. And again, if you've got access issues, if you ring our helpline, we could give you the contact details for Bath and North East Somerset Council. MS Society. The MS Society has a really good helpline. There's the number there, and it's also available by email. So if you are someone with MS, you can ring the Society helpline, and I'm sure they will do their best to assist you. Money Advice Service. So this is a government-run service and can provide you with help and information around budgeting and other money issues. So again, that's web-based. So there's the web address if you would like to contact them. WECIL. WECIL is an organisation that has information about other organisations. So if you contact them, given the information that you need, they may very well be able to signpost you. That completes the slides today. Thank you for listening, and if any of you would like to ask any questions, I will do my best to answer them, but it may not always be possible, in which case I might need to come back to you at another time. Okay, so we've got a question from Dora, who says, what do I know about personal budgets, and where can I find out more? Well, I know a reasonable amount about personal budgets, if I'm assuming I'm right in saying that you're talking about personal care. You can get information about personal care, as I mentioned previously, from your local authority. So the best place to go for that would be your local council. So in Bristol, that would be Bristol City Council Care Direct, and you can get contact details on the internet, or if you phoned the WECIL helpline, we could give you that information. If you don't live in Bristol, then it would be your local authority, so that's the people that you pay your council tax to, their adult social care department. Okay, so I hope that's answered the question, but if not, if you'd like some more clarification, please ask for that, or indeed you can ring our helpline. So we've got a question from Sally, and Sally's asking, how much carers allowance can you receive? Well, that's recently changed, so you bowled me a bit of a googly there, Sally, because up until the 31st of March it was £61.35p. Now I think it's probably gone up about 1%, but I haven't got with me the exact up-to-date details. So it's probably around about £62 something now. So it's not an awful lot of money really, considering that you're providing at least 35 hours care for someone. So really that is very good value from the government's perspective. I've got a question from Anthony, who has asked who's responsible for providing local advice for me. So primarily the responsibility for welfare rights advice is with your local authority. So in Bristol, that's Bristol City Council, or South Gloucestershire Council, etc. They will fund various agencies, and if you don't know who they fund, you can Google it, but if you've got issues around doing that, then ring your local authority and ask them. There are certain agencies that are fairly global, I would say, so you will normally always find a Citizens Advice Bureau covering your area. Age UK is a very good organisation, so if you're aged 55 and over, you can access their help, so you can contact them. But the responsibility starts with your local authority. There are also a number of independent advice agencies in Bristol: St Paul's Advice Centre, South Bristol Advice Services are two that spring to mind, as well as, I must not forget, North Bristol Advice Centre. So those are really good independent advice agencies. You can contact them. But again, if you're in this area, WECIL is an organisation I work for, and we'd be very happy to talk to you. As an organisation, we pride ourselves on trying to give you the right advice. If we cannot, then we will at least try and provide you with a contact for another agency that has expertise that we don't in the area that you're interested in. For debt in Bristol, for example, there's another organisation which is Talking Money, used to be Bristol Debt Advice Centre, and that's another good agency. So there are lots of agencies out there, and I apologise now for any of the agencies that I've omitted to mention. Another question, and this is from Chris, and Chris asks, do I qualify, or how do I know I qualify for personal independence payment, PIP, disability living allowance or attendance allowance? Well, you can go on the government website www.gov.uk and look up disability benefits, and there is a possibility there of answering a few questions to see if you might qualify. But I would suggest that as well as doing that, you contact your local independent advice agency, or if you want to, you can contact us at WECIL, and we can talk through what your issues are and make some comments and informed comments about your chances really of succeeding with a claim. But I would say it's true to say that the only way that you really know if you qualify is to get help to complete an application form, send it off, and get a decision from a decision maker at the Department of Work and Pensions. I've got another, which could be quite a long question, from Emma, asking about benefits in hospital. So if you're in hospital and you're getting a disability benefit, attendance allowance, disability living allowance, personal independence payment, or carer's allowance, these can be stopped after a few weeks in hospital. And this is because you're getting care in hospital, and therefore you shouldn't need the benefit as well. This can also affect your entitlement to income-related employment and support allowance, income support, housing benefit, and pension credit. So basically, if you go into hospital, you need to let the Department of Work and Pensions know if you or one of your dependents is admitted. If you get carer's allowance, you must tell the Department of Work as if the person that you're working pension, that the person you're caring for is admitted. So it's best, if in doubt, it's best to tell the DWP of a change in circumstances. If it doesn't have an impact, then that's fine. But it's better to do that than to not say something and then get caught out later on, because they will ask you to pay back money that you may not have been entitled to. Again, you could get advice from this from a local independent advice agency or from WECIL. If you get housing benefit and a spell in hospital results in attendance allowance, disability living allowance, PIP or carer's allowance, or even child benefit being stopped, you also need to tell your local authority. So I would say that if you're getting benefits and you're going into hospital, talk to the Department of Work and Pensions, talk to your local authority, be open and honest about what you're doing, and they'll give you the advice about how that affects things. And then if you want some independent advice just to check on what they said, ring your local independent advice agency or Citizens Advice Bureau. You can write to the office dealing with your benefits, letting them know the date you expect to be admitted to hospital and how long you're likely to stay. You should still report your actual admission or tell the office if it's cancelled or postponed. So if you need fit notes to get a benefit when in hospital, then normally you can ask the hospital staff, ward sister or charge nurse, and they can provide you with one. That is a sort of summary really of benefits in hospital. It's a big overview, it's a big subject. So I've got another question. Oh, this is from Sally. So thank you, Sally, for your questions. How do you apply for a blue badge for parking? Okay, so blue badges are provided by your local authority, so it really depends on which is your local authority. So if it's Bristol, it would be Bristol City Council. So I believe that you can go on the internet and get a form to complete, or if not, you could ring them and ask for one to be sent to you. I'm aware that with cuts nowadays, I think it would be fair to say that it can be quite difficult ringing local authorities now because they don't have quite the resources to answer the telephone that they used to, and I'm sure that you will see that an awful lot of their services now are internet based. Now that obviously does not help people who've got issues around accessing the internet. Maybe they might have maybe a disabled person who can't access the internet or needs assistance. So if you're in that sort of category, you could get some help with that. If you're in the Bristol area, if you contacted WECIL, we would try and help you with that in terms of maybe getting a form for you. But what you need is a blue badge scheme form for your local authority. You complete that, and I do recommend that you get help completing them. They're quite a long form, and they do ask for a lot of details about your disability, and it's important to be as detailed as possible. You will also need some supporting medical evidence, so that might be from your GP, or maybe you've got a specialist that's assisting you with your illness, condition or disability. So get some detailed medical evidence as well. And the more detailed the better really. I think something just saying that, well, you've got XYZ, so you've got rheumatoid arthritis and you've got walking problems, I don't think that would be enough for you to be awarded a blue badge. I think more information about how far you can walk, the sort of pain you're in, what balance problems you've got, if you need somebody to accompany you, etc. That's really good evidence, which I think would help you. I'm not saying it would guarantee, but it would help you get a blue badge. If you have a disability benefit and have got a mobility component of a disability benefit, so disability living allowance or a PIP, that can passport you into getting a blue badge. You still need to apply, but you need to send evidence off of your disability benefit. But you wouldn't normally, I would expect to have to get medical evidence from your GP or other specialist. So Sally's asked another question. So thank you again, Sally. Can I get help towards physiotherapy on a monthly basis? I would say that you would probably need to apply for a disability benefit to see if you can get some money there, and then use those costs to offset, or those costs could be offset by the money you get from a disability benefit. I don't know what you might get through the health service. I'm not a health service expert. I don't have any expertise in that area. You could contact your GP, I would conclude, and if he agreed that you needed physiotherapy, then I would have thought you might be able to get it on the NHS, but I'm not absolutely certain. I suspect, however, the difficulty might be there if you can get it, the waiting list scenario, which we know generally speaking for non-critical and urgent things on the NHS can be a bit long. So yeah, that's my answer there. I don't know how helpful I've been able to be, but I hope I've been of some help. Just going through some more questions. Universal credit. Now, yeah, universal credit is a new benefit. It's not currently in this area as I understand it, but it is coming in shortly. Universal credit is part of the government's welfare reform. It's really quite a big subject, really, and I'll just give you a brief overview. Universal credit is replacing many means-tested benefits, so that would be child tax credit, housing benefit, income-related employment and support allowance, and income-based job seekers allowance. Also income support and working tax credits. So it's being introduced gradually over several years, and currently it's not in this area as my understanding. It's worked out basically by comparing your basic financial needs with your financial resources. It's worked out on a monthly basis, and generally speaking you get a monthly payment, but there are exceptions to this that you might try to apply for to get a more common payment, say on a weekly basis, but the default is basically a monthly basis. So your financial resources include your earnings, income, capital, savings, any money that you've got, any property that you've got. You'll notice that universal credit doesn't include council tax benefit or local council tax relief or whatever your local authority call it. That would still and will remain under the control of your local authority. So if you get universal credit, if you have difficulty, then you can apply for advance of money. You will get free prescriptions and dental treatment, housing grants, free school meals, and help with hospital fares. So universal credit is replacing those means-tested benefits and will be with us shortly. It's part of government welfare reform, as I said, and the idea of universal credit in simple terms is to make work pay. So one of the problems I think identified with the system at the moment is that perhaps when somebody finds work and is on benefits, they're not able to retain enough of their benefits to make work pay. With universal credit, they say that you will be able to do that. So in other words, if you're on benefits, you get a job, you'll be able to stay on some benefits, and you'll be able to keep more of your income by paying less tax and getting more benefits than is the situation at the moment. Just going through the questions here and seeing which ones I can answer. Yeah, I haven't mentioned job seekers allowance in too much detail. Job seeker allowance is an income replacement benefit which you can get, as you know, if you are unemployed and you are seeking work. You need to contact the job seekers allowance helpline and make an application, and then you would be going to visit your local job centre. You would see an advisor there, and you would agree an agreement, and then you would be expected to seek work, and as long as you meet the criteria, then you would be eligible and you would be paid your job seekers allowance. Okay, so we got another question from Emma, and she's asked for a bit more clarification about the blue badge scheme. The blue badge scheme of parking concessions allows people with severe mobility problems, but also registered blind people and those with severe disabilities in both arms to park close to places that they wish to visit. So you shouldn't be wheel clamped or towed away if you are displaying a current badge, although your vehicle may be moved if it is causing an obstruction. So you do need to bear that in mind. So try and park as fairly as you can. The badge doesn't mean, however, that you can park on private roads and land. So it doesn't confer automatic exception from parking charges either. You've got to display the entire side of the badge showing the wheelchair. It's got to be visible from outside your vehicle. Interestingly, if you display the wrong side, that can result in a penalty charge. So the wrong side is the photo side, so just be careful there. It is also an offence not to allow a police officer, traffic warden, parking attendant or civil enforcement officer, so that might be PCSO, to fully examine a badge. So if they ask to see it, you must show them. There is actually, for England, quite a useful helpline for blue badges. 0844 463 0213. Okay, so where can you park with a blue badge? Well, you can park without charge or time limit at an on-street parking meter and in pay and display bays unless signs show a time limit for badge holders. You can park without time limit in streets where otherwise waiting is allowed for only limited periods. and you can park for a maximum of 3 hours in England, Wales, on single or double yellow lines. So in England and Wales, a parking disc must be displayed showing the time of arrival if you are parked on yellow lines or in a reserved parking space for badge holders that has a time limit. So if you're visiting England or Wales from Scotland or Northern Ireland, you do need to ask your local authority for a disc. So I'm not too familiar with Scotland and Northern Ireland, but I gather the system's slightly different there. So if you're a visitor, you need a disc. So the time limit only applies during the opening hours of the restriction. So there are some requirements. The badge holder must be in the vehicle when it arrives or when it leaves the parking space. So this is to stop people obviously borrowing badges from people that are eligible and using them when they're not. So the vehicle must not be parked in a bus or cycle lane during the lane's hours of operation, and the vehicle must not be parked where there is a ban on loading or unloading. And all other parking regulations are observed. So it doesn't give you carte blanche to park where and when you want to. So you do need to be wary of this, and you will get into trouble and have problems as if you don't follow the rules. So if you're not sure of the rules, you can ring the Blue Badge in England helpline 0844 463 0213. Okay, so somebody's asking, do I qualify? Well, you'll only know really if you make an application, but there are some basic points which might help you with this question. You can automatically qualify if you're age 2 or over, and there are quite a few criteria here. If you receive the higher rate mobility component of disability living allowance, so that's mobility benefit. If you receive war pensioners mobility supplement, if you're registered blind, if you've received a lump sum payment from the Armed Forces and Reserve Forces Compensation Scheme. In England, if you've been awarded 8 points or more in the moving around activity of personal independence payment, or have been awarded 8 points or more in the moving around activity, or 12 points in the planning and following journeys activity. So I would suggest that you get a bit of advice on that. If you've been awarded Mobility PIP or Mobility DLA, they will tell you if you qualify for a blue badge and send you a certificate that you need to send off with your application for a blue badge. There's also something that they call the assessed route. So if you don't meet those other criteria, your local authority can assess you anyway to see if you still qualify. So again, you need to be age 2 or over, and you've got to have a permanent and substantial disability which causes inability to walk or very considerable difficulty in walking. So you've got to have a pretty serious problem with walking to qualify. Alternatively, you've got to drive regularly and have a severe disability in both arms and are unable to operate or have considerable difficulty in operating all or some types of parking meter. So if you don't qualify because of mobility, that's another area that might apply to you. So in all these cases, you'll be assessed by your local authority, that's your local council. So there are special rules for children aged under 3 to qualify for a blue badge. They've got to have a specified medical condition. So that means they must always be accompanied by bulky medical equipment that can't be carried around with the child without great difficulty, or need to be kept near a motor vehicle at all times so that they can, if necessary, be treated in the vehicle or quickly driven to a place where they can be treated. So bulky medical equipment, what's that? Well, could be ventilators, suction machines, feed pumps, syringe drivers, oxygen equipment, that kind of thing. As with all applications, sometimes you get refused blue badges. Now, if you are refused a blue badge by your local authority, you don't actually have a formal right of appeal. They make the decision and their decision is final. But many authorities do have internal procedures for dealing with appeals, so it's always worth asking them to review their decision just to make sure that they've got it right. And as an alternative, well, you've always got your local counsellor that you might talk to see if they could help. There might be a local disability group, for example, or independent advice agency that might be able to assist you to change the authority's decision if they've got it wrong. If you're travelling abroad in Europe, blue badge holders visiting the European Union countries, those that provide disabled parking concessions, they can take advantage of those by displaying their badge. The concessions do vary, however, and I would recommend that you look at the European Commission booklet about this. I think it's parking card for people with disabilities in the European Union. Try and get hold of that booklet. I suspect that if you Google this information, you'll be able to find it. And just check out what you're eligible for there and what you can get when you travel abroad. Emma's asking another question about exemption from vehicle excise duty. So who can get exemption? Well, all vehicles on the road are liable for vehicle excise duty, but exemption from this for one car is given to some disabled people. To qualify for this exemption, you've got to be receiving what they call qualifying benefits. So these are the higher rate mobility component of Disability Living Allowance, DLA, the enhanced rate mobility component of Personal Independence Payment, PIP, Armed Forces Independent Payment, or War Pensions Mobility Supplement. So you, or you can nominate someone in your place, so that might be a person that basically provides you with transport, can apply for exemption from vehicle excise duty. So that's something worth thinking about. Also, if you get a disability benefit and you only get the standard rate mobility component of PIP, Personal Independence Payment, you can still get a 50% discount off your vehicle excise duty. We got a question from Jack who's asking about the Motability Scheme. So yeah, the Motability Scheme, this is an independent charity to help people to improve their mobility. Now, to be able to get a Motability vehicle, you've got to get what they call a qualifying benefit again. So that could be higher rate mobility component of Disability Living Allowance, enhanced rate mobility component of Personal Independence Payment, also Armed Forces Independence Payment, or War Pensioners Mobility Supplement. So what do you get? Well, you can get a car on lease, so including cars adapted to carry a driver or passenger seated in their wheelchair. You can get a powered wheelchair or mobility scooter. Also, you can include costs of car adaptations. So people who are getting these qualifying benefits, or the parents of children who receive it, who need adaptations to their car or help with the initial deposit, can apply to Motability for additional discretionary help, and they treat each case on its merits. So to be able to use the Motability scheme, you've got to be getting one of these qualifying benefits. So and you've also got to make sure that your qualifying benefit has got at least 12 months to run. So you're looking at probably at least a 2-year award. With this, once you've got your qualifying benefit, the Department of Working Pensions or the Service Personnel and War Veterans Agency, so the people paying you the benefit would actually, instead of paying your mobility benefit to you, would make payments direct to Motability. You cannot start or renew a Motability agreement, however, if you're in hospital. Interestingly, Motability can sometimes help towards the cost of driving lessons if the applicant receives a qualifying benefit and is aged under 25. So if you're a younger person and you get a qualifying benefit, you may not yet be have passed your test, so you might be able to get help with driving lessons. So as is common enough, there's a lot of information on the internet about the Motability scheme. If you Google Motability, you will find it. But again, if you want some information, you can contact Citizens Advice Bureau, your local independent advice agency, or indeed you can contact us at WECIL. Now, there are some difficulties with the Motability scheme because of the changes from Disability Living Allowance to PIP, Personal Independence Payment. So everybody that's an adult and is on Disability Living Allowance and gets this benefit at the moment is potentially, with some exceptions, going to be asked to apply for PIP, and there are some exceptions which I'm not going to go through now. Now, as part of this reassessment, I think it's true to say that the criteria for PIP are different to Disability Living Allowance. So the criteria for the mobility component of PIP is different from the mobility component of Disability Living Allowance. And I think in many respects it's going to be more difficult to get under PIP. So there is the potential for people who currently have a Motability vehicle because they've got Disability Living Allowance mobility component. They may not qualify for the PIP mobility component and therefore may lose their Motability vehicle. So there are transitional arrangements for this. So if you were on the Motability scheme prior to January 2013, it's assumed that you didn't know there were going to be these changes. So you may be entitled to a £2,000 lump sum from Motability so that you can purchase a used car to replace the leased car which you would lose. If you lose your Motability vehicle following a PIP reassessment and you entered into your first lease agreement between January and December 2013, you may be eligible for a £1,000 lump sum. It's less because it's been concluded that you must have known that there were going to be changes from DLA to PIP. Okay, so there's no more questions, and that does coincide with the fact that we've only got a couple of minutes to go. So just really want to wrap up. Thank you for those of you that have been listening. I do hope that some of it at least has been helpful and of interest to you. If you've got any questions at all, you can contact a number of agencies that I've already mentioned. What I'll do is just go through the slides. So I'm just pushing the slides back so you can see again where you can get more information. In any event, if you need more information, you can contact WECIL, so West of England Centre for Inclusive Living, WECIL, or you can contact your local independent advice agency, Citizens Advice Bureau, Age UK, Talking Money, or a whole host of other good independent advice agencies that are out there. Any issues on tax credits, you can contact Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, Department of Work and Pensions. If you've got any issues around disability benefits, you can contact them. But I always recommend that when you contact government departments, check what they say by getting some independent advice. There's the Employment and Support Allowance Helpline and the Carers Allowance Helpline, Disability Living Allowance, Attendance Allowance and PIP Helpline. They're all different numbers, so please make sure you get the right one. And then local authorities. As I mentioned, much of local authority contacts now is done through the internet because of their tightening of resources. So pretty much the default now for you is to contact them via the internet, but you can contact them by telephone. And on the slide here, I've given you details for Bristol, South Gloucestershire and North Somerset. As I mentioned before, the EMS Society helpline is a very good one. You can try contacting them. There's the number, and there's also an email address. And I'm sure if they don't know the answer or can't answer your question, or you need to leave a message, they will get back to you as quickly as possible. Money advice service, if you've got any money problems, money issues, money questions, you can look on the internet for those. And as I've said before, if not in Bristol, you can contact Talking Money. Well Aware, if you look on Well Aware, you can get information about other agencies and other services that might be available to you, and there's a helpline number for them. So that's the end of the slideshow. So we're going to wrap it up now, and just to say thank you for listening and goodbye.